Good evening, everyone. I'm Ruban Roberts, CEO of RER Consulting. RER Consulting has two signature programs, Teen Talk and COVID-19 Mental Health and Wellness Program. The COVID-19 Mental Health and Wellness Program is the sponsor for our Wellness Wednesdays. You can catch us here on Facebook every Wednesday night at 7 p.m., where we have special guests to come and talk to us about health and wellness issues that you can learn from, you know. So what I encourage you all to do is grab your family members, because we have a very exciting guest today who is a health and wellness specialist. Nzingah, how are you today, Nzingah?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here to chat and share information and get the message out.
Excellent. And we're so happy to have you. Feel very fortunate to have you here. But before we get started, I want to just give you a couple of some uh, quick housekeeping information. So the COVID Mental Health and Wellness Program, we have a survey that we'd like for you to take. You can go to mymentalhealthmiami.com and take the survey. You can also call our care coordination team at 786-433-8487. Why is the survey important? Survey is important because, a lot of us live under such degrees of stress, depression, anxiety that we're not even aware of it. We're normalizing this every day. So with the score, when you take the survey, you'll receive a scorecard. Many times you take surveys, you don't get anything in return. The scorecard will tell you where you are from the levels of stress, anxiety, depression, and levels of support. And with that information, you can seek additional services if you desire to seek those services. We encourage you to go to our care coordination team and contact them, 786-433-8487. They don't only give you information about mental health services, they give you information about environmental services as well. So if you need housing, if you need food, if you need employment information, we have all of that there that our care coordination team can help you with. Again, remember to go get your score. Go to mymentalhealthmiami.com and go up to the upper right-hand corner. You'll see where it says survey, and you'll be able to take the survey. The survey is available in English, Spanish, and Creole. So we encourage you, though, to take that survey in the language that you're most comfortable with, and make sure that you are able to participate and get your score. So with that being said, we're going to start off again with our very special guest, Nzingah. She is a health and wellness specialist that has so many skill sets that I think that you should definitely hear about it. So Nzingah, tell us a little bit about your program and what the work that you do.
So my company is Yes Baby I Like It Raw, and what we do is help people have sustainable wellness or healthier lifestyle through self-care practices like yoga, meditation, nutrition, mindfulness, and even detox and cleanse programs. And the program was created not out of thin air. I am, you know how they used to say for Hair Club for Men, I'm not only the client, I'm not only president, I'm also the client. Right. It came out of my personal journey. I was diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was 12, an autoimmune disorder when I was 13, as well as PCOS around the same time. And so I was told that I would have to be on medication. PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. I'm sorry, you should give what that is. Yeah. And so I was told I have to be on medication for the rest of my life, that the only way I would thrive is through that practice of medicating myself. And when I was a sophomore in college, I felt like I always wanted another way, but when I would press my physicians, because I had a lot of specialists at that time after my diagnosis, they were always like, there's nothing you can do. This is just what you're going to have to live with. And so when I started to do a little bit more research on my own, and I felt like, when you're in 20s, you start to own you start to step into your autonomy and making decisions for yourself. I felt that I could approach my healing from a holistic perspective. And so that's what I did. That looked like me addressing my trauma, because at the time, no one was talking about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how that would what probably was impacting my health at the time. I started to change my diet. I started meditating. I started journaling. I also started to do yoga. And those things in combination with me also like stepping into myself and my identity and who I was as a person allowed me to heal. And so what I found in that process, it had to be holistic. I thought I could change my diet and get off my medication and everything would be okay. And that was not how it worked. So I always say to people, don't go cold turkey. I learned the hard way. I tried to go cold turkey and I was like, yeah, I'm vegan now. It's going to be okay. And it didn't quite work like that. But I was blessed to have a team of practitioners who helped me on that journey so I could be here 21 years later, not on medication, doing things that my body's doing things that they told me I would never be able to do in this moment. And I wanted to, at the time I was pre-med, I was studying neuroscience. I thought I was going to go to med school to be a neurosurgeon. And as I delved a little bit deeper into the practices, I pivoted and decided that I could help people more effectively from a holistic practice. And so that kind of birthed, Yes, Baby, I Like It Raw, and now also the app that we created, which is 365 Zing.
Oh, wow. It's pretty impressive. And just to hear your journey, and I know it was an abbreviated portion of your journey, but it seems like you really are a survivor. You've overcome a lot, and you utilize the things that you're teaching to actually get you to the point to where you are now. So that definitely makes you, an expert or have some experience in that field. So you mentioned ACEs. You talked about some things that happened early on in your childhood. So talk to us about how that prepared you to get to the place where you are and to deal with your own health and mental health and wellness in terms of ACEs.
Well, adverse childhood, so when I speak of ACEs, so a lot of us experience trauma, either it's big T or little t, and all of them have an impact on your physical and mental wellness.
That's right.
However, if you have sustained trauma over a long period of time, the physical impact can be more drastic. And that's what I was dealing with. I had a mother who was bipolar schizophrenic when I got diagnosed with my illness. I also was dealing with some abandonment at that time and some molestation. And so as I was being diagnosed, no one was questioning what was going on with me in terms of like my mental wellness, right? No one was, when my mom first had what we found out, because I'm Haitian, so when we talk about mental illness, it's kind of elusive. It's always embedded with voodoo, and so there's not a real, like, it's still a hard conversation for my family to really connect with. And so, growing up, I would always hear your mom gets sick sometimes. Somebody did something to her. And then when I was 11, she had an episode, the first episode that I was conscious of. And I was like, oh no, like this is mental illness,
Did you see that at 11?
Yeah, I was pretty advanced as an 11-year-old.
Okay.
I was reading Chinese medicine books when I was in elementary school. So, yeah. So I just was like, no, my mom's having a mental breakdown. And so the police, that comes with its own things because we didn't know the system at that time in terms of getting her the right support. And so the police came several times, and I remember them having a conversation with me, and I was like, my mom needs help. She is not okay. And then we were able to get her after a series of calls, that's when we were able to Baker Act her, which is when they bring someone into a mental institution. And because we had really good insurance, I realized that part of my story is privilege. We had really good insurance. We were able to move her from a public mental institution into a private one. Excellent. And consequently, because she went into a private one, when they were informed that there were children in the household, they brought us in for group therapy.
Excellent.
which was supposed to be good, but we didn't necessarily get the support we needed. I vividly remember that session because my grandmother was there, and I played more of a translator because they were trying to get my mother's history and understand her mental illness. And the conversations I felt that myself and my siblings should have had didn't necessarily happen in that place. And there was no follow-up. And so when my mom came home, I became parentified, she fell into a deep depression. And so then I felt like I was responsible for her, and I was the one trying to encourage her to get up, get out of the bed, brush her teeth and things like that. And so and I was internalizing that. I didn't have a safe space to speak on it. And consequently, because of her mental illness, people took advantage of that situation and created harm. At the time, I had a parent who was not present because they were in a different country. And all of those things played a part into the illness that showed up. I have a prolactinoma, and I do work, when people find out that, they work with me specifically, they'll hire me to work with them because I was able to reverse some of the symptoms with that. And I started looking at the research, and the research shows, there's research as far back as the 1980s that show males and females who have a prolactinoma have fathers who are absent, fathers who are, or fathers who are abusive.
So for our listening audience, explain what a prolactinoma is.
So a prolactinoma is a benign tumor that sits on your pituitary gland.
Okay.
And so oftentimes, some of these conversations were considered woo-woo, but there's research to validate them, right? And when I looked at the research, one of the things that struck me was like, fathers matter. And oftentimes we're dismissive of fathers, and we feel like kids can thrive without parents, both parents. And this particular physical manifestation in the research, it shows absenteeism from fathers. People with this particular tumor tend to have some dynamic that is not congruent with their father figure.
You gave a lot of information. There's a lot to unpack there, and I don't even know where to begin. But I just want to start by saying that one of the couple of things that really I think should be highlighted is the importance of understanding, for practitioners to understand or be culturally competent when they're working with particular people from different cultural backgrounds. And I think that that's something that really stands out when you say, no one knew what to do from a cultural perspective. Many island folks, including me from the Bahamas, that's not something that your family really likes to talk about when there are some challenges as far as mental health is concerned. And so a lot of times we avoid it. We don't attend to it the way that we need to. And then by the time we get to a practitioner, if that practitioner is not aware of the culture, can't deal with you because of a different culture, if there's a language barrier, those are things that really have, a negative effect on the actual treatment of services. How do you prepare this family to deal with what's going on with their family member? How do you communicate? How do you, are you aware of the cultural customs of how things are addressed with this particular culture? So I want you to talk to us about the importance of having that cultural and linguistic competency. And for those who are watching, to know why it's important to find someone as a practitioner if you're looking for someone who has that cultural and linguistic competency.
Sure. I can speak from it on both sides. Like I can speak for it with respect with what I witnessed with my mother, and then even for myself as someone who believes in therapy. With my mother, she struggled to get the support she needed at the front end. Like I spoke of that group session, instead of having like a true group session, because there wasn't someone in the room that could speak, I was the interpreter. And then when I was interpreting things, because they didn't have that cultural nuance, they didn't understand the culture. They didn't understand what I was giving them in terms of information from my grandmother. And so it was slightly dismissive. And honestly, I don't feel like anyone has ever said, I feel like my mom hasn't had enough therapy for her to unpack her trauma, because she was traumatized when she was in Haiti. The way mental illness was addressed was her being, because she can be super violent. She was tied to a tree or a chair. Religious figures would come and break Bibles on top of her head. And I've just recently found out that she was assaulted during that time. And that's something that I never knew. And I know she's never processed, right? There was a moment that she had a Haitian practitioner, Haitian psychiatrist, psychologist. I can't remember which one he was. And that was one of the few times that she would go in weekly for her talk sessions that I felt like she had a better understanding of what she was dealing with. And more importantly, the person who was supporting her in that looked like her, could reference her culture. And so that eliminated some of those blocks to getting to the real work that she needed. And when he was there, she thrived longer, whereas when I've worked with different practitioners from different cultures, when I would have conversations with them, they would be dismissive because they had bias, like they didn't know my educational background. So for instance, my mom had a stroke while she was institutionalized, and it went unnoticed. And I
kept the medical practitioners there.
She was institutionalized. They sent her home, and I was just like, something is wrong, because usually after she's been institutionalized and they've adjusted the medication, she shows up like this, and that is not how she's showing up. And because of my background, I noticed that my mother had aphasia. And aphasia is when you want to say something, but the action transfers into something else. You don't say what you wanted to say, you say something else. So you wanted to pick up a pencil, but you picked up a knife. Or you wanted to say pencil, but you said pen. And so I specifically told my family members, especially with cultural nuances, you have to have a strong advocate. I remember telling my family members, yes, I'm traveling, but call me in when you take her to the doctor, because you don't understand what to say and I can advocate for her. Right. And so I spoke to the practitioner and I said, something is wrong. My mother has aphasia. He was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Aphasia is when someone has a stroke, and totally dismissed what I said. A week later, my mom had a second stroke. But because she was with us, we were able to get her to the hospital. And we went, when we sat down with the neurologist, they're like, oh, we noticed that your mom had a really bad stroke recently, prior to this one. And it was just like, and then when I spoke to her primary physician, he said, sorry, I'm really sorry. But it was like, you totally dismissed me because I am speaking a language that you're not used to for someone of color. And, that's a big thing. Like, even with and I see how things change. When I say bias, it's not just even bias in terms of color, it's terms of bias in terms of like, they don't think you know anything, like, so my father also had a stroke and I noticed certain things because of my background. And I was like, hey, I noticed that my father has aphasia in English, but he doesn't necessarily have aphasia in Creole and all these other things. And I was able to present that information to them, and they were able to support him better. And when they knew that I had that background, they checked in with me so I could help them figure out what was going on. And so in that context, they saw me as an ally instead of an adversary. Whereas with my mom's situation, I wasn't seen as that. And that led to her having global aphasia, which is not something you want to have. With global aphasia, it just doesn't impact the language. It impacts her actions. So she's lost all of her autonomy and her liberty. Like, she can't do the things that she used to do for herself because of that, because she wasn't treated like she was supposed to in that institution. And she was, and so that's where we're at. So with me,
malpractice to me. I mean, it's
Yeah, that's right. We're kind of dealing with something like that right now, actually, to be
okay.
quite honest. And so also with myself, I was blessed to have in my adulthood when I started doing my personal work, I saw a mental health practitioner. I saw my counselor was Black and she was a woman. So she could mirror me and reflect back. And I remember later on, I saw a practitioner who wasn't of color and she did know my background. And I used the word cognitive dissonance. Because that's part of my vocabulary. And I was like, yeah,
Mm,
I have a cognitive dissonance with this thing. And she's like, oh my God, how do you know that word? And I could tell that she had been approaching me with her bias in terms of what she perceived of people of color. And then I was like, oh yeah, like I gave her more information about myself. And that completely changed how she interacted with me. But that should have not been the case.
right.
I mean, like, and so like my go-to oftentimes is to a person of color. And it's not to say that someone of color cannot be my practitioner as a therapist, because I have a practitioner now that's not a person of color, but I feel like she's been trained to lay her bias aside and be present in the moment with me so that she can support me with my needs. And so it's a very nuanced conversation. I think it's less nuanced when you're just going to therapy just to deal with like life and its ups and downs. But when you're someone who has mental illness, I feel like that cultural nuance becomes more imperative because you can place someone in harm's way. And that's what I watched with my mom.
Yes. I think you're absolutely right, especially about the cultural and linguistic part. And then people's perceived notions of who you are as a client, as a patient, as a consumer, things like that, definitely, or as a caretaker or a family member. And I think that those things are things that we need to be considerate of. I think that this is something that speaks to why some folks who may have received a diagnosis, received treatment, but then they they disengage, and it's because of those nuances that you speak to when folks are feeling that they're being spoken down to, or that the information that they're attempting to share is not considered, or even when they attempt to share and they can speak the same language, you can both speak English, what that practitioner hears and what the person is saying is not gelling. So
Yeah.
imagine if you speak a totally different language and then you're trying to convert that, whatever your experience is, that you can speak it well in Creole, but trying to convert that into English, into
English.
another language, where they just don't get the correct understanding. So if that's your parents' or your mother's primary language and the practitioner is only English speaking, it's going to be a challenge for that practitioner because of the cultural disconnect, and the linguistic disconnect. So definitely you've highlighted the importance of that. And I agree. You don't have to have a therapist that is of the same race or ethnicity, but you do have to have a therapist that knows how to show empathy and how to connect with you, about your cultural influences and that sort of thing. We need to make sure that we are very mindful in requesting that when we see our practitioners. So that's very good information. I'm glad that you shared. I hope this is helpful to someone who's listening. Again, this is the COVID-19 Mental Health and Wellness Program. We're here today with Nzingah, who is a health and wellness specialist. He's dropping some gems here today to talk to us about the cultural impact of receiving services, mental health services, or health and wellness services overall. We want to encourage you to participate in our survey. You can go to mymentalhealthmiami.com, click on the link. You'll see the survey up in the upper right-hand corner. Once you complete the survey, you'll receive a scorecard. With that scorecard, it'll tell you where you fall from a 0 to 10 range in the areas of health. In areas of depression, stress, anxiety, and support. If you feel that you need some additional support, we encourage you to go to our care coordination team, and you can reach them at 786-433-8487, and that's powered by New Horizons. We are a culturally sensitive program. We have all of our collateral information is in Creole, Haitian Creole, Spanish, and English, because we understand that people really can thrive by getting information in their primary language. So we want to make sure we encourage that. So Nzingah, you shared with us about just the journey and all the things that you dealt with from childhood, with family members, with yourself, and then you decided to go into this holistic type of lifestyle, and you decided to make some changes on your own. You advised us against going cold turkey and off the meds, and making sure that there's I guess a combination approach. And you also expressed the importance of having practitioners who can work with you while you're on this journey. So one of the things I want to ask you to share with us is tell us about that journey in terms of what was the main thing that caused you to use this holistic approach, and give us one major benefit that you had by doing this. And then I want to talk to you about your own practice, and you can tell us a little bit about some of the things you do there. But let's start with you about this journey. What was the straw that broke the camel's back for you and said, hey, I'm going to get off these meds and get on to something that's more holistic in treatment?
I was tired of being sick and tired.
Okay.
What people don't often talk about is when you are on medication, it resolves some things, but oftentimes it comes with its own side effects.
Side effects are killers.
Yeah. And so, and I was also seeing a conflict with my physicians, my specialists, where
Really?
one person would prescribe something and another person be like, no, you're not supposed to take that. And and then I had a conversation with my primary care doctor, and I said that this was what I was going to do. So let's be clear. I had established relationships with most of my physicians at that point. They had been with me for close to a decade.
Okay.
Where like we could talk to them, and because they also knew that I was a nerd, I was intelligent. Whenever I visit, I was like, well, I was looking this up and this is what it is. And do you could we say that this caused this, And so I think they liked that about me. I was blessed in that kind of way. And so I also I was sick and tired of being tired. And I also spoke to my primary care doctor and said that this is what I'm going to attempt. And they supported it, and when I tried to get off some meds cold turkey and I had to go to my gynecologist because it led to me bleeding for a month, he was like, okay, you can do that, but you can't do it cold turkey because you've been on medication for a long time. So what we can do is lower your dosage while you figure a way out. So what helped me have confidence, because I was only 20 years old when I started this journey, was that I had the support of the adults around me. And then, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. The teacher started coming. But I was tired of, I knew what arm was my good arm for blood. Like, okay, you got to take my blood to test it. This is the arm, not that arm. I was tired of seeing specialists on rotation on a regular basis. I was just tired. I didn't want to live like that for the rest of my life. That could not be the way. And I also knew I wanted to have children. And I was placed on birth control. And I knew over time, the longer I was on birth control would impact my ability to have children. And I didn't want to stay on birth control. And so I was thinking long-term of impacts of being on birth control, because they were using birth control to help stabilize my hormones.
Right. So, I mean, your plus was that you were able to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
And that you've done the research, but there are many folks who are not, able to advocate for themselves. They may not know or are aware, of their condition at the level that you were, or what are the possibilities to use some sort of alternative type of treatment. And so what do you say to those folks who are in that position?
Well,
How do they address that issue? If
Some of
they're
the work that I do is helping people learn how to advocate for themselves.
okay, good.
And so, I don't just sell products. I give out a lot of free information. And a lot of the work that I do with my clients is having them understand their bodies and how to better communicate with their physicians, and knowing that their physicians are at their service and they're not at the service of the physician. And they know their body better than anyone else. And I also learned that, my first advocate wasn't me, it was my mother. I would have never got diagnosed if it wasn't for my mother, because when I started presenting symptoms, my pediatrician was completely dismissive. And they were like, just wait, it'll normalize out. Because one of the symptoms of my tumors, I didn't have a regular menstrual cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was like, something is wrong. When that comes on, it comes on. It doesn't do this little come here, then it doesn't play hide and go seek.
Mm-hmm.
And so she tried to work with a pediatrician, and then she was like, nope, it's been 6 months. I need you to run some tests because something is not right. And so she kept persisting. And I think one of the things that I noticed, particularly with this new age that we're in, we take the first no and accept it as a no.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't push back. And we need to learn to push back more. Because again, we know what's going on in our bodies. And if we don't push back, we might never get the help that we need. And I mean, I have a friend now, like I've been talking to her about advocating for herself. And I was like, you're not going to get diagnosed at an ER. They're there for emergencies. And if
Right.
you got to go to a doctor who understands what's going on and who's going to work with you. And so, I would say because there's a lot of clinics where you can have like a primary care physician and they have a sliding scale, but having an established relationship with a physician and not using urgent care and the ER, the emergency room, as your way for wellness trying to get a diagnosis. It's not the way to go, because you won't get the answers, especially if you're dealing with an autoimmune disorder. And a lot of people who've experienced ACEs tend to have a propensity, and there's a research around that, to have autoimmune disorders.
Excellent. I think you're absolutely right. And thank you for sharing that information. I think that one of the things that we must consider is that some of us, who definitely may be underinsured or have no insurance, really receive our medical attention through the emergency care. And for those of us who have particular diagnoses, it's very important that we have a practitioner who specializes in the area that we have a diagnosis in, so that we can get the correct treatment, and not just to go and deal with putting the Band-Aid on the issue by going through urgent care or the emergency room. So I appreciate you sharing that. But since you've already mentioned that this is something that you help folks with in terms of your services as a health and wellness specialist, please talk a little bit more about your business. Tell us how we can reach you, and tell us about the services that you provide. You mentioned nutrition, you mentioned mindfulness training and meditation, but tell us a little bit about all of the services that you provide, how we can reach you, and how, if someone is having some sort of a barrier with language or culture with their practitioner, how you can be reached to assist them in that area.
Sure. So you can find me at yesbabyilikeItraw.com. That's my website. We have tons of resources there. We have a podcast where you can learn information. We have recipes that we give. We even do yoga pose of the week, so that you can understand the benefits of specific yoga poses, so that you can implement them in your life. We also have an Instagram, which is yesbabyilikeItraw.com, where we share very similar information. In terms of specifics, we do health consultations where we help create a wellness plan for you to address specific illnesses if you're trying to reverse them or to prevent them. We really believe in prevention, and we really believe in a mind, body, spirit. Whenever I do work with someone, we're always going to have a conversation about your stress, because we can do all this work and have you, particularly with my people with hypertension, I could do a lot of work, get the meals right, get you moving, having you learn how to use your breath to lower your blood pressure. But if you're still consuming a lot of stress, all of that work is null and void, you
Mm.
know? And so there's a big conversation around that for me, in terms of like, how do you manage your stress? What tools do you have in place to help you manage your stress? We also do meal planning specifically for people who have like diabetes, hypertension, and high cholesterol, and they want to use food as their form of medicine. We work with different practitioners, so I don't believe that I'm your end all be all. So we have teams in place if you need to see somebody specific that we can make recommendations to. And we also believe that your spiritual health is very important when it comes to your wellness, because sometimes that's what keeps us going, is what we believe in and what we're grounded in. So we have those conversations with different spiritual practitioners and how do you create a spiritual ritual for yourself. We have detox and cleanse programs that we help people do a reset. We call it 21-day reset, and that's coming up actually for next month. We always do it around the equinox and solstice. And it's just a great way to slow down and spend some intentional time with yourself. And that includes a meal plan, yoga, weekly group coaching, so where you learn different wellness practices and things like that. We also have cookbooks. I am in the process of releasing a plant-based vegan Haitian cookbook.
Mm.
We believe that cultural foods can be healthy, and we're trying to attack this notion that in order for you to be healthy, you have to give up your cultural food. So a lot of the work I do with clients is, how do we keep the foods that you love in your kitchen without it impacting your health in a negative way? And so just teaching those modalities is really important for me. And we also do specific meal plans and retreats and things like that as well. And we have yoga classes online and in person in Broward County, as well as, it depends. Some people hire me. I do a lot of corporate work as well, where I host classes for different corporate institutions who need those services to be delivered to their employees or people that they work with in the community.
And you provide these services in English and in Creole?
English, Creole, sometimes Spanish.
Right. And how can you be reached again? Give that contact information.
Yes, baby, I like it raw.com.
All right. And there's an email address or
info@yesbabyilikeItraw.com.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for joining us today and really sharing this information about the journey of dealing with, mental illness diagnosis from a cultural standpoint. I thought that this was very helpful for folks from all cultures. And I'm hoping that those who watched today really benefited from this information. Again, we want to encourage you to go to our COVID-19 mental health and wellness website at mymentalhealthandwellness.com to take the survey so that you can get your score. You need to know your score. The scorecard will give you information on where you fall in categories of stress, depression, anxiety, and levels of support. And we encourage you to make sure that you get your score so you'll know what to do and know the next steps. This is Ruban Roberts and Nzingah signing out for the COVID-19 Mental Health and Wellness Wednesdays. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for next week.
Bonjour, non mwen se Nzingah, m kontan ou la avek nou. Jodi an ap pale sou santé mental, avec santé pou ko nan tan COVID-19. Gen fwa le nou ap pale sou santé, nou selman pale sou kon nou, men nou pa pale sou nan nou, en santé mental nou. En kounya moun ki la yo mymentalhealth.com, yo pon ti tan pou yo komanse ede nou pale sou santé mental nou. Kaz li gen yon efè sou ki jan nou santi nan kon nou. So, bon, histoire nou, sa yon bagay ki trez important pou mwen, peut-être se nan sa m travay, en se sa ki ede mwen m jwen santé. Ankon non mwen se Nzingah, en travay m fè m ede moun pran soin tèt yo nan tout aspect fizik, aspect mental, avek aspect nan yo. En avek kompanyi mwen ki rile Yes Baby I Like It Raw. Nan kompanyi mwen m ede moun at prend soin, si yo gen problème cycle, si yo gen problème tension, tout bagay qui capable faire santé et de changer genre manger et de faire pratique pour diminuer stress dans la vie, so ou ka gen plus bon la vie. Là m'entrer dans travail ça et pas peut-être m'de gen santé, m'entrer dans travail ça peut-être connaît m'de servir avec travail ça pour peut-être moi. Là m'de un petit monde, yo devine découvrir que m'de gen un tumeur dans cerveau, yo devine trouver m'de gen une maladie que système immune commence à attaquer comme moi avec m'de gen un problème avec hormone moi. Là m'de fait commencer à adresser maladie m'de gen c'est ka docteur m'de aller c'est dans remède yo mette. Mais pendant yo mette dans remède là, oui, m'de joindre un soulagement, mais remède là vinn bon mon l'autre problème. Pendant vinn grand monde que m'de gen maladie ça là m'de gen 12 ans, là m'de gen 20 ans, m'de vinn faire un petit vinn faire recherche, m'de vinn faire étude, et me trouver que m'de cap adresser ça m'de gen avec remède naturel. Et là me dit remède naturel, m'a juste dit naturel c'est mon prend fait, là me dit remède naturel, me veut dire m'prend une approche qui holistique. M'a pas adresser corps, m'a pas adresser non, m'a pas adresser santé mentale moi. C'est dans là ça me vient trouver que l'aime faire un changement dans la vie qui bon mon santé, qui aide avec stress moi, qui aide avec ça m'a mettre dans comme manger, devine trouver que tout ça qui est maladie ou des causes moi yo vinn sortir. Et dans là ça me vient commencer faire comparer moi Yes Baby I Like It Raw avec gen l'autre compagnie que m'gen Haïti que le Impact Hub Port-au-Prince. Dans Impact Hub Port-au-Prince, je commence à travailler avec Haïtiens dans le pays pour une stratégie pour prendre soin santé mentale avec santé, toute santé. Dans ça, je commence à parler sur méditation. Méditation sont belles gens pour aider sous ou gain un paquet de stress. Et nous pas qu'à faire mentir comme haïtien, stress son bagay nous très vraiment gain un paquet là-dedans. Et so ça me toujours dit moun travail avec dans Haïti, problème c'est pas un bagay ou ka jamais son problème la vie a toujours bon problème. Mais ça qui est plus important c'est gens qui te problème nan agir sur vous. Et nous ça on besoin créer son on valise que on gain stratégie pour aider les problèmes arriver sur pour pas faire choc. So, des fois nous fait choc nous pas comprendre c'est nous fait un choc. So, compagnie ça qui m'a parlé avec nous aujourd'hui yo gagne un survey. Dans survey là, yo gagne survey en créole, dans survey répondre question yo montrer et là vient du côtoyer pour santé mentale. Yo pas juste du côtoyer, y a beaux outils pour aider pour qu'à prendre soin tête. Puis important pour prendre soin tête mentale. So, sous besoin parler avec un monde ou caprer numéro 7 86 433 8487 ou cap aller dans lien qui est en bas là, ouais lien là qui dit mymentalhealthmiami.com. Chaque mercredi yo fait en classe, yo fait en séance, yo jeune moun yo vinn parler avec pour aider ou prendre soin tête. Mais ça qui est important pour kounya, c'est pour prendre survey. Là prendre survey, sou pas parler anglais bien, yo gen en créole, dans survey il y a bonne information pour aider pour qu'a bien prendre soin tête. Si vous avez une question, vous voulez demander ou ka brelem ou pas dire ou ka voyer mon email sur website moi www.yesbabyilikeItraw.com. Ça qui nous connaît qui est important pour nous joindre santé, c'est pour nous commencer gen moun qui comprend culture par nous, qui parler avec nous non sens c'est face à face. So ça qui cause nous mettez moun qui pas nous gen survey dans créole, nous gen moun qui qui haïtien qui ka parler avec ou. So là me dit nous moi me connais des moun pour yo pi bien manger. M'pa dit ou pas manger haïtien, mais m'a dit qui jon ka ajouter ça va manger pour ka bien santé. So merci pour tout petit temps de prend pour me parler avec vous. Mandez-nous, me dit nous merci nous prend temps pour nous tendre pendant un moment créole la malouk. Encore s'ouvre les plus d'informations pour ça y a porté pour en créole al nan lien qui en bas. Ouais lien li là. En gen un numéro de téléphone, si vous même vous voulez parler avec moi, vous voulez venir pour me faire une classe pour en créole, ou cap joindre moi dans yesbabyilikeiraw.com. Merci encore, non moi c'est Nzingah et passez une bonne journée.